Hello, I'm Charlotte Cohen and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Thursday the 18th of December. And this morning we're focusing on Aberdeen.
Yes! I've got it right this time. It's Ouchie that's clipped it over McCracken into the back of the net to give Aberdeen their second goal.
A resurgent Aberdeen are climbing the table, but the fans were unhappy with manager Jimmy Tilleen earlier in the season.
It's so tight, so small margin sometimes, and we need to keep doing and take game by game and try to be a little bit better and even learn from this game how we start the game, but also be proud how we end the game.
How are the fans feeling about the boss now? And they're in European action tonight facing Sparta Prague. But how will they get on?
Nisbet on the turn, 1-0 Aberdeen! And Kevin Nisbet's 14-game goal drought is over, and that is a massive goal for him and a massive goal for Aberdeen.
We've got every Aberdeen angle covered right here.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Alongside me this morning, the Press and Journal and Evening Express, Ryan Cryle. Ryan, how are you this morning?
Yeah, not bad. Okay. He says somewhat sarcastically. I've been feeling a tad under the weather, but I'm ready to go.
You're going to rally for tonight.
Yes, so I'll try.
Good stuff. And alongside him, Gary Scott of the ABZ podcast. Gary, good morning. Thank you for joining me.
Morning, Charlotte. Thanks for having us.
Nice one. Well, plenty to get into with Ryan and Gary. Let's start with Aberdeen's recent resurgence. Because, Gary, it seems like everything's almost rosy at Pittodrie at the moment.
It's maybe one way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, you can't argue, obviously, with the results. I think we're 1 defeat in 10 league games at the moment, 7 unbeaten now. The informed team in the country over the last 5 matches. So, yeah, from a results perspective, you absolutely can't argue with what's been happening. There's perhaps still a little bit of a niggling doubt about some of the performances we've put in. You know, the first 45 minutes against Kilmarnock at the weekend was really, really poor, but I guess you can't be too greedy, you know, considering we came into October with no goals scored, a solitary point on the board, to now be in a position where I think only Celtic and Hearts have won more games than us in the league now is quite remarkable. Although maybe part of that's also down to what's happening in the East End of Glasgow at the moment as well, but we won't talk about that too much here today.
Thank you for sparing us more chat about that. I suppose part of that is also probably down to this change in formation that has made them a bit more solid at the back. Ryan, have you noticed that from Aberdeen in the last couple of games, just being a bit more shored up at the back?
So it was funny, when the back three first came in, or the back five, or whatever you want to call it, they became really solid, and it was like clean sheet after clean sheet. Well, I think it was 4 clean sheets in 5 or something. And then the issue you had was that they just, attacking wise, that was kind of limiting what they could do, and they looked quite goal shy, and they looked quite sort of threatless going forward. As soon as they found that attacking threat and started scoring goals, the back three has at times looked a bit shaky. Like if you think about the St Mirren game, the 3-3 game, the defending that game was like quite calamitous at times, but it was balanced out by the fact that they'd finally kind of clicked into gear at the top end of the pitch. But yeah, generally speaking, that back three, which is tend to be Nicky Devlin, Jack Milne, and Mats Knooster, who for me is kind of like one of the best Aberdeen signings of recent times on a free transfer. I found him really consistent, really reliable. Generally that's looked far better than it did with the back four earlier in the season.
And you talk about that, the struggles up front. Do you believe that Aberdeen have the quality within the squad at the moment that could start to turn and things could start to click?
I think they do have a lot of attacking quality in the squad. There's no arguing with like Jesper Karlsson's sort of like track record. I mean, at times he can kind of look, you know, like he can just sort of like turn it on when he wants to, sort of a little bit on the left side. But when you add in like Topi Keskinen, Kevin Nisbet, Marko Lazetic, these kind of players, Adil Ashish and his kind of playmaking abilities from deeper in midfield that we've seen in the last few games, there is a lot of sort of feels like there should be more goals in the team than there has been, and it feels like there is like a lot of goals in the team. I do think they're still maybe short of like. I was actually speaking to fans in Prague yesterday about like what the priority should be, and I think a lot of fans kind of think that there still is a need for like a penalty box striker. Kevin Nisbet, when he plays in his own, which Jimmy Tilleen tends to play one striker, Kevin Nisbet, he tends to drop a bit deep to get the ball. Marko Lazetic, still quite young, but isn't entirely reliable for kind of being in around that 6-yard box, and sometimes a decent cross will get put in the box and he's not there. I think I'd still like to see maybe I think a lot of fans with an experienced goal scorer just to add a bit more at the top end of the park.
And Gary, you mentioned that kind of difficult start to the season. What do you think that was down to?
I guess if we had the answer to that, we'd be sitting in Jimmy Tillene's seat. I don't know. I think there was a multitude of different factors. I still think we came into the start of the season a little bit undercooked. I think we played 3 pre-season games in total. One against Cove, we had a closed door against Fulham, and then we had a friendly with Ipswich at home. I think when you look at the rest of the league outside the teams who were in Europe, obviously you've got the kind of League Cup group stages to really kind of bed you in. I think we benefited really well off of that last season. That really let Jimmy Tillene get up and running quickly last campaign. I think you have to look at some of the signings that we made in the summer. Don't want to necessarily go into too many details, too many names, but you look at, Ryan's just talked about, the fans are talking about potentially needing to get an out-and-out goal scorer in the number 9 position. The number 9 that we did buy or that we signed in Kushini Yengi has not, not set the heather on fire by any stretch of the imagination. So I do think that some of the recruitment that happened in the summer was puzzling, to be fair. I think we put a lot of our recruitment in the summer as well into youth, when they maybe wouldn't be players who we would see an awful lot of this season, but they've been brought in to give us that kind of pathway over the next few years, that when we do sell some players like the first team squad right now, we've got replacements ready to come in, and that's great, but that doesn't necessarily get you up and running from a results perspective straight off the bat. And we just really struggled at the start of the campaign. We struggled to keep clean sheets. We were letting in daft goals left, right and centre. We couldn't score. We looked really toothless, and you could just see the whole confidence of the entire side just kind of evaporate in front of your very eyes. And I just think there was a multitude of different reasons as to why we started the campaign as badly as we did. But the main thing for me now is that we've somehow found a way to turn that around, it would appear.
And I suppose you go from the high of that Scottish Cup final win to then just completely almost dropping off a cliff and having a really bad start to the Premiership campaign. And Jimmy Tillene obviously had a lot of grace in the bank from that cup final win, and rightly so. And it's kind of feels like he's just had a bit of a roller coaster season. But how do the fans feel about him now, Gary?
That's a good question. I think there's still there's always going to be that niggling doubt in the back of your mind as to just how we're doing. I mean, we had an incredible start to last season, that no one will forget. We then had an awful drop-off from pretty much this sort of period of time right the way through to basically the Scottish Cup final. We had the most incredible day of a number of Aberdeen fans' lives on the 24th of May. And you're right, you come at the start of the season, and I remember us thinking, wow, what an opportunity for the club now to really kick on and really build from that and take that momentum from winning the cup. And for it to have just disappeared as kind of quickly as it did was so disappointing. In fairness to Tillene, he deserves a lot of credit after the 2-0 defeat at Tannadice. I don't think a lot of people saw a way back for him. The defeat that day was really poor. We could have been playing United that evening for 3, 4, 5 days, and I don't think we would have scored in that game. It was really bad, and there are times, and Ryan will know this as well, when you get a certain vibe out of an away support in particular, because I always tend to find your away support tends to be, it's more of your diehards, and it's potentially some of the people who are more willing to give a manager a bit more time, for example, than potentially knee-jerk podcasters like myself. And the atmosphere in the away end that evening was not good. And I always think it's difficult for managers to return from that sort of position. I think it was Stephen Glass at Dens Park a few years ago. And in fairness to Tillene, he has managed to turn that around. That being said, I do think that there's sometimes moments where we're not far away from like a 1 or 2 game run of defeats where we might be back to where we were. Again, Athens away was a great example of that at the start of this run that we went on, where a lot of fans came out of that evening really questioning the manager again in terms of his selection. But he's got credit in the bank, as you say, from the Scottish Cup win. He appears to have the backing of Lutz Pfannenstiel, our new sporting director, who came in coincidentally not too dissimilar time as to when this run kind of really kicked off. And I'd be very intrigued to know how much influence Lutz has had in terms of just conversations with Jimmy about, is this a way to operate? Is this a way to play, for example? How do we get the best of the squad we have just now until January? So yeah, it's an interesting piece with Tillin. I think he's got enough credit in the bank now. He'll obviously be here and he'll see through the January window, and I think that probably means he'll be through the end of the season unless something catastrophic happens, and then we kind of need to see where we are from there.
Maybe the new sporting director brought a penguin with him to Pittodrie. Maybe that lifted the spirits. I think it lifted my spirits.
He won't like that. He won't like that being mentioned. He's a serious guy. He's focused on Aberdeen.
A therapet. I could do one of them a lot of the time watching Aberdeen, to be fair. So.
Just looking ahead, Ryan, they've got a really difficult run of fixtures coming up. Well, Celtic's maybe not looking as difficult as it was a few weeks ago. Dundee United, Hibs, Falkirk, 2 back-to-back games against Rangers. There's potential for a lot of dropped points there, but also maybe a lot of kind of picked up points as well.
Yeah, and I think there is. I think it's going to be a pivotal time of the season. It's amazing that, given the start they had, and I agreed with what Gary said there about the sort of reasons behind that start to the season and how poor it was. It's amazing that they're kind of like on the cusp of third place. They're well in the fight for that now. It does feel they've got momentum with them. But yeah, this Celtic game of the weekend, obviously, you view it as well through the prism of the Conference League game in Prague tonight, and like how does Tillin balance up, the need to win that league game and the big opportunity there is to win that league game, and really sort of like really put Celtic into full-flung crisis mode. But then, Dundee United, that's a team that are on Aberdeen's coattails. You want to hold them at arm's length. Hibs are the team that you're like level on points with. So you could make real strides in this upcoming period. It'll be, is it probably, it's kind of a cliche of our business, but is this kind of like the sort of run of fixtures that the whole season hinges on, maybe?
Just off the pitch, there's this talk of the new stadium. Gary, is there a feeling that things are finally kind of moving on that front?
Not really. I remember we always reference this in the podcast. There was a DVD the club released in 2003 to celebrate our centenary. And in that DVD, I think it's Stuart Milne at the time is on screen talking about how it's imperative we have to move to a new stadium within like 5 years or whatever the time frame is, because Pittodrie's fallen a bit and all this kind of stuff. And here we are in 22 years later, and nothing really has moved on from that perspective. I know there's been a lot of sabre rattling from the club and also from the council have had their say on it. And there was a meeting obviously last week about agreeing to agree that they're going to explore the possibility of doing something. So I'm very much, hanging my hat in the mast that I'll be probably still sitting in my season ticket seat at Pittodrie when I'm a pensioner, the way things are at the moment. I don't know. I find it laughable. I think we're probably the only club in the country who seem to find it this difficult to rebuild a stadium or to build a new stadium. And I talk about across the British Isles from that perspective. We'll wait and see what happens. They've put in this position where they're going to agree about, try to explore what will happen with it, and we'll see what comes by the end of March. But I'm not exactly holding my breath on it.
Let's look at tonight's game. Obviously, Aberdeen out the Conference League, so it's a bit of a dead rubber. But Ryan, are the fans still having a good time out in Prague?
Well, they seem to be. My hotel room window is above the Dubliner pub, which is the Irish pub of this trip that Aberdeen fans are mainly hanging out in, of a few. And I would say that while I was, up suffering last night, at all hours I could hear Aberdeen fans shouting their heads off in the street, singing songs. So
that got lift your spirits.
Yeah, and everyone I've spoken to seems like, it's like a great city to come at this time of year as well, very festive. And they seem to be having a very good time. But I still get the sense that like everyone that's out here expects us a decent enough team to win the game, a performance, and they want to sign off the European campaign by actually winning the 8th attempt in Europe this season.
Sparta Prague are not going to make it easy for them, though. They're going to be really tough. 2nd in the Czech League, 6th, I think, in the Conference League. Gary, how do you see Aberdeen getting on?
I think tonight's a really interesting game. Ryan touched on it as well. I have two views on this part. This might be because I'm not in Prague. So from that perspective, there's an element about it I don't care. But then I also remember being in Helsinki a couple of years ago for what wasn't a dead rubber, when we could have still progressed in the Conference League, and Barry Robson stuck out what was effectively the reserve side. And I remember thinking that was a real slap in the face to the fans who'd paid their money to travel to Helsinki in that occasion. And I kind of feel the same way about tonight's game in Prague. It's going to be interesting. There's the pragmatic side of me goes, the game against Celtic on Sunday is much more important, and therefore we should put all of our eyes on that, and we play a second string side tonight. Not to say that actually we've got a second string outfit who are actually pretty handy, to be fair, if you look at the likes of Leighton Clarkson, Antti Palaversa, guys like this who haven't played much in recent weeks. At the same time, though, you've got pride at stake as well. There's an opportunity financially to pick up some more cash if you pick up points in the Conference League at the same time. And we kind of want to sign off, I think, from the Conference League on a bit of a positive note, because it's been a disappointment overall. But that also has to be put into context in relation to the draw that we got, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned about the Celtic game on Sunday, and Ryan, you touched on it as well. Does it feel like this game, given that it is a dead rubber, is maybe getting in the way of things when you're looking forward to the domestic action? Or I suppose it's a game in Europe, like you don't really want to take that for granted?
No, I don't think you want to take it for granted, because it's like, by the time we get to it's been the same in both European campaigns. By the time you get to this stage, some of the shines come off it with the amount of flights, certainly for me, the amount of flights have been on and stuff. But like, you've got to remember that this is the involvement, like being involved in European competitions is kind of what a lot of fans live for, the chance to go like to new places and, follow their team and have effectively like an Aberdeen FC themed weekend holiday sort of thing. So yeah, I do think I agree with all the things that Gary touched on about why the game still has significance. I also think as well, just from like a morale perspective, you're on a decent run. Like it's ahead of Celtic at the weekend, especially a game where some people will still consider Aberdeen underdogs in that game, and you want to go into it like in high spirits, and you won't be in high spirits if you take another European tanking, if it ends up being like 4 or 5-0, that's not going to help anybody. So yeah, I think for the fans that are out here, it's very much not getting in the way. This is a game that really care about.
I suppose Aberdeen were very unlucky with the draw that they got for this competition. I'm pretty sure I saw a stat that was like they had statistically the most difficult set of fixtures. But Gary, do you feel they were particularly unfortunate with the draw they were handed?
I mean, massively. As you say, statistically, it was the toughest set of opponents we could have got on paper at the time that anybody drew in the Conference League. And it's borne out in the way that the tournament's played out. I think of our 6 opponents, 4 of them are currently in the top 8. 2 of them are in the top 2, which are Strasbourg and Shakhtar. Larnaca were topping the table for a while. They beat Palace away. They're on the cusp of making it into the top 8, depending how results go. Even FC Noah, who everybody looked at and went, that's the minnows that we've drawn, they're currently 17th. They'll qualify for the playoffs if they pick up something against Dynamo Kiev. For context there, they beat Legia Warsaw, who knocked Hibs out in the qualifying round. They beat them in the last match day. And when you look back at the pots as well that all these teams came out of, Shakhtar are the best performing team who came out of pot 1. Sparta are the top performing team who came out of pot 2. Strasbourg are by far the top performing team who came out of pot 3. Athens are the top team who came out of pot 4. Larnaca are second, and Noah are joint top performing team who came out of pot 6. So we literally could not have had a tougher set of fixtures. And when you look at some of the teams who you could have drawn, it really just gives you that completely different picture as to how the campaign could have borne out. And I think actually, to be fair, in Europe, with the exception of the Athens game, we've actually performed all right. Like, we could have taken 3 points in Larnaca. We should have beaten Noah at home. We could have taken a point off of Shakhtar. I think we probably deserved, our first half performance deserved a point against Strasbourg. Suddenly the tournament looks very different if that happens. It's just been really unfortunate that this is how it's landed for us. And yeah, it kind of is what it is, unfortunately. Now, you can't complain about it. We've had those teams in front of us. We've not performed, I don't think, to the level we were hoping to, or certainly picked up the points we're hoping to get. But it's been a real eye-opener, I think.
And Ryan, you talked about all your various trips across Europe. How How has the experience been this season overall? I suppose, Gary mentions there about the performances maybe actually being better than it looks on paper, but how has the whole experience been for you, and I suppose the rest of the Aberdeen fans?
Well, I think it's it's always good. These trips are always good. They never let you down. They're different. Like Athens is like a mega city. Larnaca was like a very small place where like all the fans kind of like were congregating together. So it's a totally different vibe. Then, you've got 2 summery kind of like trips when it's getting quite cold in Aberdeen, which is always nice. And then obviously Prague with the Christmas markets and like, you're getting similar to the season with Helsinki where, we had Eintracht Frankfurt, we then had PAOK away in Thessaloniki, which was like a very summery place to go that time of year. And then, we had Helsinki, which was like, again, the polar opposite, if that's not an unintentional pun. So, yeah, I do think, like, no matter what happens on the pitch, there is an element with these trips that the fans will enjoy themselves anyway. So you'll hear people often quip half seriously that like the football's just an inconvenience when you come up.
That's 100% what happened in Athens. 100%.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's been great, and it's just a shame that as Aberdeen, as I mentioned, they're staring down potential of finishing third and getting themselves up there this season. It's just a shame that the coefficient changes the way it works, changes next season. So you'll be back to, qualifiers and how difficult those are and the quick turnaround. And traditionally, a route that Aberdeen haven't really been able to navigate over the years to get themselves through to like league phase football, or what used to be group phase football. So you do kind of wonder when the next, European groups adventure will be, or we'll just have to, deal with maybe like a trip to Kazakhstan and then maybe like a trip somewhere else far flung next summer. But yeah. Wouldn't change it for the world.
You got to make the most of tonight then.
Yeah, bar the last 12 hours, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Well, just before we finish up, I'll get both of your predictions for tonight. Gary, I'll come to you first.
Despite everything that points in the opposite direction, Aberdeen will sign off tonight with 3 points. So Sparta Prague 0, Aberdeen 1.
Nice. Ryan?
I'll be positive. I'll say 2-1. I've heard quite a lot of people, like quite a lot of the fans I've spoken to, have given me that prediction 2-1. So yeah, I'll piggyback on them.
Nice one. I'm liking the positivity. I'm enjoying it. That's all we've got time for. Many thanks to Ryan and Gary. Thank you very much for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and we'll catch you again very soon.
Sir Alex Ferguson is the most successful British manager of all time.
Nobody is above him or this football club.
So how did an apprentice toolmaker from Glasgow become one of the most iconic figures in sporting history?
His strength of character, his determination, the fight in him.
He can be persuasive, he can be charming, he can be frightening.
I'm Kelly Cates, and this is Sporting Giants Sir Alex Ferguson.
I didn't want to feel, I couldn't feel.
Listen on BBC Sounds.